Deep underground, past flooded caves and sunken lakes, a set of rusted metal doors looms over Shona and Kynan, two Ironlanders who have traversed all these forgotten tunnels and derelict passages connecting the set of caves until they are finding themselves here at the entrance to the sunken grave of Etana. In this moment, Kynan forgets everything that brought him to this point. His shipwreck, the ill-advised killing of the two salvager raiders, Saskia's retaliation, Siora's death and subsequent haunting. He is to some extent where he belongs, doing what he's good at, down the bottom of some long abandoned delve site, using only wits and guile to keep himself alive. There's only that one niggling annoyance that he can't quite shake, the metaphorical thorn in his side and potential axe to his brain. Shona, his supervisor sent by the raiders to make sure that he sticks to the vow he's made to recover the treasure of this sunken grave for Saskia, the raider leader, and for all we know who might be here to do more than just supervise and look for revenge for the duel she lost in the lead up to this delve. So all in all, not the most comfortable situation, but it could be worse. Somehow. There could be rats. Hey, how are ya? I'm Anderson and this is once more Kill 10 Rats Plays Ironsworn. Now, as we've learned from the intro, this is going to be mostly a delve, and I think about 33% of one. We've already made progress on our dangerous delve worksheet here, where we've made it past the sea caves and into the actual grave site, which we would like to know a bit more about, so that's what we're probably going to start with. And in today's episode, what I think we're going to push for is to get to the point where we can locate our objective. So the purpose of struggling our way through this underground site in the hopes of locating something that makes it worth Saskia's while to let the villagers of Stone Ridge go. Now let's remind ourselves we are delving a hallowed sea cave barrow. We've made it past the sea cave part, so we're effectively now entering a hallowed barrow. And there's a set of doors, eroded, rusted iron doors, metal doors. We don't even know what kind of metal. It could be our hallowed engraved iron, might be something else. And for me, I think once we've pushed past this first obstacle in our way into the grave, that's our first milestone on our vow as well. I've had a bit of a thought about this delve site continuation in the time between this and the previous recording, and I've been wondering about what exactly the grave part is going to look like. So that's something I would like to ask the Oracle about. But first, I'd like to have Shona and Kynan deal with that set of doors. I think in this stage of our delve, a few hours have passed during which Shona has done little but follow Kynan and glare at the back of his neck. And while she's still glaring at him, there's now also more of a quizzical, questioning expression on her usually stoic face as she looks to Kynan to figure out whether he has some idea how to get past this entranceway, past these chains wrapped around the hoops in the iron door connecting one wing to the other. Now, the preparation for this delve was not ideal from an experienced delver's point of view. All we had were the resources of a struggling fishing village and not enough time. So I'd like to check our gear now to see whether we brought something helpful to help us deal with these doors. Either something to attack the chain, like a lever of some sort, or something to help us get into the eroded stone and get at the hinges to make progress that way. So I'm gonna roll plus supply. We have 5 supply, so that is actually a strong hit, which gives us 1 additional momentum, putting us up to plus 4. And I think the way this plays out is Kynan looking at the chain, inspecting it, turning round to face Shona, extending one hand, need your spear. And Shona narrowing her eyes suspiciously, considering whether she'd be comfortable accommodating the request. and then eventually pulling out her axe, holding it in one hand before she unslings the spear from her back and sort of extends it to Kynan, who grabs it and takes a few steps back, nods. And the way we envision this spear is that the sturdy wood is bound in metal to make it more robust, which helps Kynan's intended use for this weapon, which in this case will double as a door opening implement, or rather chain destroyer. Because what Kynan's figured out is that this chain is very rusted and eroded from the frequent flooding in this underground room. And what he's hoping to rely on is that he can use the spear in between chain links of the two separate parts of the chain and kind of twist it until the chain gives way and just snaps to the strength of the two of them pulling and to the sturdier metal winning out against the eroded part. So he shoves the spear in between two chain links, nods to Shona and goes, "Help me turn this." So I think we're gonna face danger with iron here because there might be risk involved with this. There might be noise attracting denizens, there might be traps, we don't know. So let's find out. Okay, so we roll 4 plus 3 iron plus 1 Shona. That leaves us with a weak hit. And we suffer 1 supply as the spear breaks. So Kynan and Shona are struggling to get purchase on this chain link, pushing the spear down and down, hearing that creaking of the chain. And eventually the chain just snaps and sends them flying backwards, and Shona, holding on to the spear, has a bit of an unfortunate landing and snaps off the top and ends up holding a metal-bound stick with a spear tip on the ground. But they've opened the door, so this is where I get a bit curious what is beyond the door. Before we pull it open, let's roll aspect and focus on the Delph oracles to figure out what kind of gravesite we're facing, what is right behind the doorway. 36, foul. I'm getting a little bit freaked out by these dice. So that's 100 and it's power, foul power. If we think back to the setup of this delve, we hear from Saskia that this is a collaboration of the first primary Ironlanders and the Marrow. For motivations we have yet to uncover, or maybe we'll never know, collaborated to create this grave of Etana. We don't really know who Etana is yet. We might want to figure that out as soon as we get closer to. But one thing Kainen's already speculated about is that the Marrow collaborating with the Ironlanders has only one explanation, which is to meet a mutual common threat, since they are otherwise hostile to the Ironlanders. So now that we understand we are dealing with a foul power here, this whole gravesite being steeped in just corruption and ancient dangers from who knows how long ago, some perhaps even recurring threat that just was defeated again when Marrow and Ironlanders collaborated. I'm more and more coming to think of this place as less of a grave and more of a prison. So maybe that which is imprisoned here isn't entirely dead. I want to know more about this. Let's figure out who Etana is. Is Etana even a person? Or is Etana some kind of ancient horror? I don't want to really make it likely to have it be a horror almost by default. Let's go with 50-50, 51 plus, it is a horror. 48, it is not a horror, but it comes close to being a horror. I don't know if I'm supposed to read the dice this way, but I kind of enjoy, if it gets very close to that threshold, to play with this a little bit. So Etana is a person. Is Etana an Ironlander? Again, two parties involved, 50-50, 51 plus, yes. 99, oh boy, is she ever an Ironlander. Now, what was Etana's role? 52, Etana was a leader. What was Etana's goal? 88, find redemption. I think I'd like to establish a secondary goal here as well to illuminate this redemption a little bit. So what's the secondary goal? 56, protect a secret. That sort of strikes me as Etana isn't the problem here, but more of a contributor to the solution. Maybe Etana is almost in a similar role as the old man, who is the outside protector, and Etana could be the inside protector to redeem herself. Which makes me wonder, what did she as a leader do that required redemption is connected to this site? And also, since this was a while ago, Etana is very unlikely to still be alive, which means that her current form is either a revenant or a haunt or something of the sort. And that in death she watches over this foul power in this place to find her redemption. So could the need for the redemption have been something that she did as a leader to perhaps strike some sort of deal with the entity that is actually locked up in here, and that while this was done with good intentions to protect the early Ironlander settlement, it was also a sort of proverbial deal with the devil. So the good intentions were co-opted, corrupted, and the outcome was overall negative for the early Ironlander settlers, and brought the Marrow up to the plate, who then stepped in and perhaps figured out that, hey, the Ironlanders have awoken insert ancient horror here that we know about as the Marrow, and we will now have to collaborate with them to bury it again? Yeah, I think that's probably what the setup is here. So the Ironlanders come here, they struggle at the beginning. This is a location right here where there is no iron pillar. They are probably at odds with the Marrow right from the get-go. They lose people, and at this point they're not Ironlanders yet. They're just arrived fresh off the boat, refugees, old worlders from various locations in one kingdom that they set out from, following the footsteps of the Pathfinder. And maybe they settle in those sea caves first and foremost to find some shelter when they arrive, before they manage to construct themselves a settlement. And maybe this site was already here. Because during our world building, we also established that there are ancient places, that there used to be a precursor civilization here, and that ruins exist that are worth delving into but dangerous to enter. So our first Ironlanders, led by Etana, come here, they explore their sea caves, they fight the Marrow, they find this same entrance in much better condition, they open it, and within they encounter this foul power that makes them an offer to gain its freedom. And then with events unfolding, the Marrow are suddenly flipping on the Ironlanders, figuring, hey, oh no, they have awoken this thing, we need to do something with them. A truce is reached, the Ironlanders eventually ending up convinced that Etana is fallen under some horrific corruption, and then Etana becomes the enemy. And through the collaboration with the Marrow and the Ironlanders, eventually, just before she perishes, finds her redemption as the guardian of this site and the jailer of this horror. So I guess now we're at the point where Kynan and Shona are about to make that same mistake again, and hopefully they're not gonna unleash some ancient monstrosity to make everything worse. Of course, we know they are going to. But okay, we've established things about this site now that make me pretty keen on going in deeper. Let's see what lies beyond. Let's get an idea of the features of the next step into our delve site. What do we see once the door opens? And also let's reach the milestone. So feature roll. So the iron doorways open on a maze of narrow passages, which I find quite fitting. Now, reaching a milestone, that is something we haven't done before because we have so far not made any progress on our vows. We're still technically in the prologue of this whole narrative. Yeah, this is gonna be a long one. Okay, so this is not actually a roll. This is just a mark on our on our vow here to progress, and it gives us 2 progress boxes because this is a dangerous vow. Now, what does a maze of corridors and narrow passages looks like that is steeped in foul power for centuries, maybe even millennia? If this site is so old that it's precursor, oh yeah, this is thousands of years old. As the double doors creak open on hinges, unmoved for decades, a foul stench hits Shona's and Kainen's nose. It's the smell of spoiled meat, of decomposing flesh, but also a sweetness that just doesn't match at all with this underlying rot. And as they both stand there gagging and covering their faces, they see that the corridor beyond is almost alive and squirming with a sheen of oily liquid just running down the walls, and hundreds of fat scuttling beetles and centipedes just squirming all across the surface and on the floor as a centipede the size of Kainen's forearm scuttles out between the double doors and into freedom. And I see that these underlying walls, once whitewashed, are now just rotten and brittle, with wall covering in bubbles and already fallen off, formerly gold inlays just black and rotten. And I think faced with this is fairly far outside of Shona's regular comfort zone, and while it doesn't rattle her to the bone, it makes her speak for the first time, and she is stating what the two of them are already separately noticing. No Ironlander built this. And Kynan nods. He's seen places like this of a similar age before, but much further north. And maybe he's even surprised to locate one of them so far south, which perhaps in his circles this is generally an area deemed not worth exploring. And now here he is. This is older, much older, perhaps older than the firstborn. It is cursed is what it is. Very likely. And we just opened it. And with that, Shona looks somewhat uncomfortable. But if that's what she looks like, this is also what Kynan feels like. He is not thrilled to be here at this stage. He did not expect to find this here. And what in his mind was a short in and out into an Ironlander gravesite that the first Old World refugees built here all of a sudden turned into a crawl into the rotten tomb prison of whatever is locked up in here. And he's not relishing that thought one bit. What have you gotten yourself into? Kynan hears Siora's voice ringing out, speaking up for the first time in a while. And of course she's being judgmental again, but equally she isn't entirely wrong. But it can't be helped, so the two of them steady their nerves, look at each other, look at the entrance, and march in. So we delve using wits and we miss, which means we get to reveal a danger, which I find quite appropriate given the circumstances. So as they progress through the maze of passages and corridors, what do they find? We roll on the reveal a danger table a 09, which means check the theme card. The theme says denizens enact the will of their god. So which denizens are we talking about here? We're talking about a bone walker or bone walkers. Now I need to remind myself what that is, because I think in this case it's a mindless creature that's controlled by something else. Bone walkers are human remains given a natural life. The source of the dark energy animating them is a mystery. Some say it is the will of dark gods. Well, I guess that's fitting. So a bone walker is a dangerous foe. 2 progress per harm, inflicts 2 harm. It is a skeletal corpse with yellowed bones and tattered remains of clothing and armor, with the urge to destroy life. Since they're dangerous foes and Kynan isn't alone, I figure it's probably likely that there's 2 bone walkers currently stepping up and getting in Kynan and Shona's way. This is to represent also the combined combat prowess of Kynan and Shona outweighing a single bone walker. So 2 of them versus 2 of Kynan and Shona make up for 1 dangerous progress track. So let me just ask the character activity oracle to figure out what they're currently doing. 11 securing. Okay. Not the most exciting result, but the one that also makes a lot of sense. So they are guardians. Kynan and Shona traverse the maze of intersecting corridors for what feels like hours. The suffocating stench doesn't ease up, this uncomfortable warmth pulsating on their faces the beetles scuttling around, the occasional flying bug being swatted away from their faces. They're not exactly having a great time. So it is somewhat of a relief when at the end of one of these narrow passages, finally 2 steps lead up into an arched opening which reveals a wider room. And at the far wall of that room, on the left and right outside wall, are 2 more arched passages, while in the middle, the center wall, rear wall, Kynan recognizes an altar with old world religious symbols back when the settlers still held, some of them at least, to their old gods before recognizing that their gods had likely abandoned them and falling back on their own belief in fate and destiny and the Pathfinder. So this is a sign of the first Ironlanders, Old Worlders being in here. And to the left and right of this altar, 2 stone seats have been carved out of the wall, the altar being somewhat placed into the wall itself, carved from the stone. And thereon, sitting with their heads bowed, are 2 humanoid shapes. They're dressed in remnants of rusted, decomposed military armor from one of the forgotten old world kingdoms, sitting holding on to a sword, each a 2-handed sword, their heads helmet clad, bowed, so their faces are obscured, but Kynan can see from the protruding bones and the gaps in the armor that these are skeletons, or rather corpses decomposed to the point where the only thing that remains of them is bone and dried meat. And he has just enough time to reflexively grab for the hilt of his sword when the 2 of them simultaneously raise their heads, blue light flaring up in empty eye sockets, and with surprising speed just shooting up from their seating position, flipping their swords around, their heads bowed and skewed at an unnatural angle as they scuttle forward in jerky, repulsive-looking motions and make to drive off the 2 invading parties in the form of Shona and Kynan, who are now readying themselves for combat action. So as Kynan steps into a fighting stance with his sword out and Shona raises her shield and slams her axe once, we make to enter the fray. We're doing this with heart in this case because we are facing off against our foe, and that foe is also quite terrifying. And we get a strong hit. So we are taking 2 momentum and we have the initiative. I think that's a fairly straightforward one. The 2 of them are coming forward and Kynan and Shona are stepping forward to meet them in the middle of this otherwise empty space, and we're representing this by striking. So that is downright terrible. I think we should reflect this in having the worst possible outcome manifest as Kynan takes a wound that not only costs him health, but puts a bit of time pressure on the encounter to have the wound addressed properly or continue losing more health. So I'm going to treat this combat now, due to the wound that Kynan takes, as a scene challenge instead, and giving us a 4-box countdown, which the first of is now already filled. And as we also lose health to pay the price here, the opponents have the initiative and we fall back into this mechanic of facing danger, securing an advantage to meet the scene challenge, which in this case seems very appropriate as we have to face danger. I think the most appropriate step to face danger here would be iron, but before that let's visualize what happens. So bone walkers come forward, their skeletal faces turned on Shona and Kynan as the 2 of them each get to deal with one of the skeletal guardians, and we get a glimpse of their unnatural strength as one of them holds that 2-handed sword more like an afterthought, really, trailing it behind him as he makes the jerking motion and that scraping sound of metal on the floor as he draws closer, his jaw hanging open, some clicking sounds emerging from a throat that no longer functions. And Kynan is facing that enemy, trying to evade the perceived attack, and what he just doesn't count on and what catches him off guard is the speed and the strength of that swing, where one moment the two-hander is just dragged behind the skeleton on an arm that looks like it's about to fall off, and the next second it's just brought up in a wide arc with incredible speed and just catches Kynan in the side, knocking him over and opening up a very bad wound that needs addressing immediately. So we're down to +3 health, and we are up 1 on the progress track. And we get to face danger now. That's a weak hit. We have a troublesome cost. I think in this case we are losing 1 spirit because we are encountering stress here. Kynan is caught in a bad way, realizing he's badly wounded and trying to get back to his feet with the Bone Walker towering over him. He's lost sight of Shona. He just hears the clash of shield and metal and just manages to roll out of the way as one more blow from that jerky sword arm comes down and hits the ground next to him as he pushes himself away and up to one knee and uses his sword almost as like a crutch to push himself back to his feet. So a weak hit here means that we are losing progress on the countdown track as well as making progress on our fight here. And I think what the progress track represents here, the additional countdown that makes it all the more urgent, is that as he pushes himself up and tries to face his opponent again, he hears Shona cry out in pain from somewhere on the other side of the room. So let's face danger again. That is unfortunately another weak hit. So we lose 1 more countdown. We are paying the price in terms of, I think, more spirit here. This is just a nightmarish situation where Kynan is sensing this could well be the death of him or the two of them. And he's now on his feet, favoring one side with his sword, trying to find an opening as the movements are just too unreadable for him. These Bone Walkers are delaying their attacks or striking with a speed that you just do not see coming, seemingly freezing for a moment to study you and then just exploding into another flurry of movement, bringing that sword up at unnatural angles where you can almost see like their shoulders dislocating for a split second as they just bring that arm up in a very strange arc. So the weak hit gives us more progress, and we cannot really afford to lose another one of the countdown tracks. Let me see, what would we be advised to do here? We need the next roll to go well, that is facing danger, so I think we should secure an advantage here. So I think what Kainen's trying to do here is to capitalize on his ability to use trickery, and by baiting out the attacks from the Bone Walker in a certain direction, just reading his attack pattern to the point where he can at least predict somewhat that the creature clearly operates on sensing weakness because it's favoring attacking the injured side. Kynan is using that in a way to circle around and try and match the fight in a way that he can perhaps bring himself into a position where he can attack the Bone Walker that Shona is dealing with out of a more almost like an ambush position where his attack will not be seen coming, thus hopefully dispatch with one of them so the two of them can address the remaining one. So he tries to reposition, securing an advantage, just using his deceptive and tricking movements to bait out an attack so he can slip past the Bone Walker. Let's see how it goes for him. It goes well. So we have a strong hit here, which gives us the outcome of the move, which means we can make another move now with a +1, which is, I think, what we should do. So the next phase danger, which in this case has us try and confront or help out Shona, who we now see has also taken more of a nick on her shield arm, as the bone walker she's facing has managed to get his blade in above her shield, but is otherwise holding her ground very well. And we'll see if Kynan cannot use his attack momentum to get the bone walker smashed in the back of the neck, while also making sure that he himself is not taking damage from the bone walker he is facing. So we are facing danger, and I think it's that +1 that saves our bacon here. So we have 4 plus 3, which is the... Yeah, we gotta use iron here because we still have a foe to confront, while also... Actually, it's more like edge, but it doesn't matter, it's the same stat. So +3 would not be enough to beat the 7, but the +1 from the secure and advantage makes it so that we actually get a strong hit on the scene challenge phase danger, which gives us progress, and so far then also saves us from bleeding out. Now we have 6 progress. That's almost a coin flip, really, if we resolve the scene challenge now, or if we face danger again but run the risk of getting a weak hit and then losing the scene challenge altogether, where we have to then figure out what happens with Kynan, as he probably stands the risk of losing consciousness. So I think we're gonna try and... Well, first let's actually visualize the outcome. So Kynan successfully manages to strike at Shona's foe, just timing it so that out of the corner of his eye he sees the sword coming at Shona, who successfully deflects it with her shield. He sees his own opponent currently again stuck in study mode, where he just looks at Kynan with jaw just hanging askew, and those clicking sounds coming out of that dead throat as it seems to try and say something. And he uses that opportunity to just spin around and lash out with his sword at the back of the neck of Shona's opponent, and manages to knock the helmet off and make it stumble forward, which also gives Shona the opportunity to shield bash it once and bring up the axe and get it to lose a lower part of one of its arms, which is not going to slow it down much, but it could bring us into a position to end the fight now, except that this is also a very risky proposition. So I think I am going to... Yeah, I'm gonna secure an advantage one more time, I think. So Kynan backs up even further and tries to close ranks with Shona and make sure that they both have both of the opponents in view, so they can also focus fire, which in this case I think is an edge move on the secure an advantage. Oh boy, we roll a 6. That is enough to get a strong hit. So we get another +1 on the next phase danger move. We could also take 2 momentum, which might actually be smarter, because we're gonna have to face danger again anyway in this dynamic. Yeah, I'm gonna take the momentum, which gives us more of a chance to meet that phase danger, and then we're gonna see how it plays out. So if as Kynan and Shona now fight shoulder to shoulder, and their 2 opponents, one of which is now holding the two-hander as the other arm dangles uselessly, and the second of which that Kynan was facing is still doing its thing where it's treating this two-hander almost like a one-hand club instead, just doing these wild overhead swings or just random swings. We're facing danger again. Okay, so we roll a match of 5s and we succeed. Okay, so first we mark progress on our challenge, which brings us into a position where we can actually probably end it now. We don't lose that last bit of countdown, Now, what do we do with the match? I think we want to ask the Oracle what's going on here. So action and theme, because we have because the description of the match invites us on a strong hit to envision a positive opportunity, a positive plot twist kind of thing. 89 lose, 82 enemy. Okay. Well, that means we kill one of them. So I think I'm gonna interpret this to mean that also with the sense of hope and just overall snatching that victory now from the jaws of almost dying. Seeing that one enemy go down just gives us some positive momentum here. And I think now we're going to want to urgently end this fight and end this scene challenge. We have 8 progress. We need to roll a 7 or below, and that gives us a 75% chance to see this through. Let's see how it goes. Matching 7s. That's probably good. Okay. So now things happen in quick succession. Kynan baits out an attack which gives Shona the opportunity to decapitate the first of the bone walkers that she was struggling with, making him scattered in various pieces across the floor. And as the remaining enemy then repositions to meet both attackers and takes a step back, Kynan capitalizes on that brief moment of flat-footedness to just cave in the creature's head and dispatch that last remaining enemy. And again, we have a positive turn of events, so I'd like to figure out once more what that is, and we're once more going to get some inspiration from the oracles here. 86 locate, 88 knowledge. Okay, locate knowledge. I think what I'd like to do here is to have the knowledge that we locate be a reflection of getting a sense in which direction to go next. So as the bone walker crumples, Kynan gets a look at the light going out of its eyes, and it doesn't just disappear. It's almost like that covering moisture on the walls, the brackish black liquid that is like a sickly sheen on every surface in this site, is now luminescent and leaving the eyes of the bone walkers, dripping onto the ground, and it's set apart in this case a bit by the sheen that it still has as it drifts slowly, almost on its own will, towards one of the 2 passages, which I think Kynan standing there just covering his wound and catching his breath and trying to make sense of what he's seeing before him takes as a hint to understand that probably whatever force, whatever power is in this site, and whatever power is probably the origin of the site where also most likely there is the item or treasure to be found that will let them escape from here, is in the direction of that corridor. This last dissipating remainder of the bone walker is now trying to reach. So I think that gives us a +1 on our next delve move. So let's delve again. We roll another match and a successful one at that. So we do mark progress and we find an opportunity. Let's see what the opportunity is. 49. You locate a secure area. Okay, that's probably good, considering we're a bit beat up. Now, what would a secure area in this place look like? It's a bit hard to fathom, really, but I think it may have something to do with the quasi-religious nature of this place, as well as the marrow. I think what I'm picturing is that the marrow also have an access point into this site, and that they, unlike the Ironlanders, probably still occasionally check in on it to make sure that nothing untoward is happening. So as Kynan and Shona follow the path deeper into the grave, they come across a wall that has been broken through. So the masonry has crumbled as an uneven, jagged entrance point that connects the corridor wall to a carved, short corridor that leads into almost like a grotto, where a standing pool of water is the central feature of a very low, small cavern. And the entire wall of this corridor is covered in alien carvings and bits of shell used as inlays for pictograms, while little idols from animal bone and abstract shapes are strewn throughout. And as Shona and Kynan step into this corridor to investigate and make it a few paces into the grotto, the lingering feeling of oppressive fear and just this unnatural warmth dissipates somewhat, and they get the sense that they have located a space that is outside of this corruptive presence that is in the grave of Itana. So they understand that they've made it to a spot where they can probably legitimately take some rest and take some more time to see to their wounds and perhaps heal up a little bit. And I think that sees me well out of recording time. This did take a little bit longer than I thought, so we'll continue this next time. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you then. Bye for now.